Good day everyone. Welcome to the fifth lecture for the course IE306 Supply Chain and Logistics Management. I am Matthew Baby, Assistant Professor with the Department of Mechanical Engineering at Rajagiri School of Engineering and Technology. In this lecture, we will be dealing with a topic from module number 1, where we will be discussing the macro processes in a supply chain. So in the last lecture, we saw the various views that we use to classify the processes in a supply chain. We talked about the cycle view where we classified processes into cycles, and we also saw the push-pull view where we classified processes as either push or pull processes. So in this particular lecture, we would have a look at the various macro level processes in a supply chain. So all the processes that are performed as a part of a supply chain can be classified into three broad macro level processes. They are customer relationship management or CRM macro processes. Then we have the internal supply chain management macro processes. It is abbreviated as ISCM. And we have the supplier relationship management macro processes, which is referred to as SRM processes. So the CRM or the customer relationship management macro processes are all the processes that occur at the interface between a firm and its customers. So all the processes that are that basically happen or occur at the interface between a firm and its customer fall under the category of macro process called customer relationship management macro process. The second class is the internal supply chain management macro process or ISCM, and this includes all the processes that are internal to a firm. The third macro process in a supply chain is the supplier relationship management or SRM macro process, which is basically a combination of all the processes that occur at the interface between a firm and its suppliers. So all the supply chain processes can be placed in either of these three macro processes, either the CRM, the ISCM, or the SRM macro process. Now it is very vital that these three macro processes are integrated, very well integrated. If it is not very well integrated, then supply chain management won't be effective or successful. So successful supply chain management requires proper integration of these three macro processes. So as I told you, poor integration will lead to large amounts of customer dissatisfaction and high supply chain costs. So this is basically a schematic that represents the various macro processes in a supply chain. So between the firm and the suppliers, we have the supplier relationship management or SRM macro processes. Between the firm and its customers, we have the customer relationship management macro processes. And within the firm itself, we have the internal supply chain management macro processes. Now, there are various processes that are performed in a group of macro processes. So say for example, the supply chain relationship management, it includes processes like sourcing, negotiating, buying, etc. In the customer relationship management macro process, we have activities or processes like marketing, pricing, selling, order management. And in the internal supply chain management macro processes, we have sub processes like strategic planning, demand planning, supply planning, fulfillment of orders, field service, etc. So this is basically a schematic representation of the macro level processes or macro processes in a supply chain. Now, the customer relationship management macro process or the CRM macro process, there are two basic aims for this particular macro process. The first and foremost aim is generation of customer demand, and the second one is basically facilitation of order placement and tracking. So the CRM macro process is generally involved in activities or processes which help in generating customer demand and help in the facilitation of order placement for customers and order tracking. So these include processes like marketing, which include activities like preparing marketing catalogs and materials, maintaining websites, etc. It includes processes like pricing and sales, includes activities like order management and call center management. So here, in call center management and order management, they are involved in activities like taking orders and providing customer services like information regarding products, services, their prices, their availability, etc. So these kinds of call center management where customers can call a toll-free number and inquire about a product, its specifications, its price, its availability, etc. They all fall under the macro process called customer relationship management. So the fundamental aim of CRM macro process is to help in generating customer demand and to facilitate order placement and tracking for customers. Now, the second macro process in a supply chain is the internal supply chain management macro process, and this basically includes all the activities which are performed or processes which are performed internal to the supply chain, okay, or internal to a particular firm. So the aim of ISCM or internal supply chain management is to fulfill the demand that are generated by the customer relationship management macro process in a timely manner at the lowest possible cost. Okay, so the aim is basically fulfillment of demand at the right time and at lowest possible cost. So the ISCM macro process includes processes like planning of internal production and storage capacities. Okay, so you decide inventory policies, the location and capacity of warehouses, products to be stored, etc. You also are involved in they are also involved in carrying out processes like preparation of demand and supply plans and actual fulfillment of orders. Customer orders are actually fulfilled, and all the process of fulfillment of orders like picking, packing, shipping of orders, they are all processes which fall under the macro process called ISCM, internal supply chain management. The last macro level process is supplier relationship management or SRM macro process. Now the aim of the SRM macro process is to arrange and source and manage the supply sources for various products and services required by a firm. So any firm that is involved in manufacturing products or delivering services to customers will require certain resources. Okay, it might be in the form of raw materials, subcomponents, or assemblies that they use. Now these subcomponents, raw materials, or assemblies that they use have to be sourced or arranged from some person, okay, some supply sources, and you have to also think about managing these supply sources. So supplier relationship management macro process is essentially involved in arranging or sourcing the different materials required and managing the supply sources for various products and services. So they are involved in processes like supplier evaluation and selection, negotiation of supply terms and conditions, which include negotiation of prices for the various materials that they have trying to procure, negotiating regarding delivery terms and conditions, etc. Okay, and they are also involved in processes like communication with suppliers regarding new products and orders. So this includes sharing demand and supply plans of the firm with the suppliers and placement of replenishment orders from the part of the firm towards the suppliers. So this basic core aim of supplier relationship management is to basically arrange for various sources and to manage various supply sources. Okay, so these are the various macro processes involved in supply chains. So there are three macro processes in supply chains. They are the customer relationship management process, which includes all the processes that take place at the interface between a firm and its customers. Then there is the ISCM macro process, which is the internal supply chain management process, which includes all processes which are internal to a firm. And then we have finally the third macro process called the supplier relationship management macro process, or SRM macro process, which includes all the processes that occur at the interface between a firm and its suppliers. So as the name suggests, supplier relationship management involves identifying suppliers, okay, negotiating terms and conditions with suppliers, and managing these suppliers. So with this, we conclude this lecture. Thank you.